Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jace of the Forestry Project. In today's video, I want to discuss some tools. Now, I wanted to talk about tools for a little bit. I think tools are very important to land management. We can't really do anything without them, but I was hesitant to do just this is what I recommend, because I don't know everything about land management. There's a lot of tools that I don't have experience with that I think would be very useful. So I don't want to just give a blanket, like these are the tools I recommend using. However, there are a few things I want to think about and talk about when we're discussing tools, and a few ideas I want you to keep in mind when you're deciding what tools you want to get to manage your land. Now, the first thing is cost. And I want to get into, there's two types of cost when you look at tools. There is the monetary cost that you see, paying for it, and that's whatever cash it costs. And then there is the time cost. So how long does it take you to do a management activity with it? Essentially, how efficient is it? Now, reliability can go into that, and we'll discuss that a little bit later, but think about the two various kinds of cost. Now, another thing I want you to think about is how multi-purpose is it? Is it a one-task tool, or can this tool be used on a variety of different situations, different management activities? Because especially in the beginning, looking at cost, having something that is multi-purpose can be a lot more effective from a cost to benefit standpoint. Now, another thing I want to discuss is thinking outside the box. So a lot of times we have tools that we already own that we could use for land management, but they're not sold specifically for land management. So thinking outside of the traditional tools that you see and thinking about what you can use that you might already have. And lastly, I want to kind of finish up with just some apparel and accessories that I find is very useful for working on the land, as far as clothes to wear, vest, hat, stuff to carry stuff in, and just stuff to wear to make what you're doing more efficient. So let's get into tools for a second and look at what I used to use, what I've used now from a cost standpoint, and looking at the monetary versus the time cost. So the first couple of tools that I would start off working on the property was an axe and a pair of loppers. Now, this axe here, it's not a full-size axe. I forget what the weight on the head is, but it's a decent enough size you can split wood with it. I've split quite a bit of wood with it, but it's also small enough you can pack, you can take it out. Now, you're not going to be fast cutting down a tree. It can cut down a tree though, but this is really for processing the stuff once it gets cut down. Now, typically I'll keep this in the truck. You can see the little leather case sheath that we have for it. So I'll typically keep this in the truck. You never know when you need to split wood or something. And I like to keep an axe on hand. Now, this is a tool that is cheaper in monetary cost, but has a high time cost from, say, cutting down a tree. Now, if we look at the loppers, and I really like this pair of loppers. If you're going to get a pair, get ones you see this gear here that articulates. Get those. They make it a lot more efficient when you're cutting stuff down. But again, this is for cutting the small stuff. It can't really handle the big stuff, and it takes time to go through an area. Whereas, let's talk about maybe a chainsaw. And let's think about how this chainsaw here is going to be more efficient time-wise, so cheaper considering time, compared to this axe here if we're thinking about cutting down a tree. However, monetary cost on this is a lot more expensive. Now, when I got this, you'll see it's steel. I got the steel MS-261. I really like this chainsaw. The 261, it's a professional version, So a little bit more durable hardware and a little bit more rugged construction. And I went with steel. I knew they had a good reputation as far as wood, the timber lumber industry goes. But I went with them also primarily thinking about location and proximity. So there's an Ace Hardware not very far from our land that sells steel. So when I was thinking about what to get, steel was really a good option, seeing how I could go get replacement parts, get other stuff relatively closely instead of having to drive. Now, if your closest hardware store is, say, a Lowe's, a Home Depot, whatever it may be, you might want to consider the brands that they carry just from a going and getting stuff for it. But I went with the steel. I've really enjoyed this chainsaw. But again, I'm not necessarily getting into this is the product I use and this exact saw is the one that I recommend. Now, if we think about clearing trails and stuff, I used the loppers quite a bit, but recently I got this, and it's just a weed eater that still sells a head for you can cut with a saw blade, and I use this for a lot of brush clearing. I really enjoy it. It makes it so much easier being able to go through and cut the small stuff than using the loppers. But again, that monetary cost was quite high compared to the loppers. So it all goes down into what you want to spend monetarily and what you want to spend time-wise. Now, one thing to kind of think about with that is there's an inverse relationship I've found between the monetary cost of something and the time cost. So this chainsaw is really expensive monetarily, but it's really cheap time-wise compared to these loppers here that is really cheap monetarily, but it's more expensive time-wise. It takes me more time to do something with, say, this versus this, or the axe versus the chainsaw. Now, when we're starting to think about tools, another important aspect is to think about what you plan on doing. So you may not need something for your property, or you may need something very specific. So when I'm looking at clearing trails, creating fire breaks, one of the things I enjoy using, or I hesitate to say enjoy, but one of the things that I find really useful is a rake. Now, they sell fire-specific rakes, and I do plan on getting some of those. I've looked, and Forestry Suppliers is currently out of stock on the one that I want. But this is another tool that I use quite a bit, and it would be worth getting a specialty tool for that. But sometimes having just a multi-purpose rake is always good. So I try to keep a rake on hand. However, again, from the time cost, what would be better than a rake for moving, let's say, leaves out of the way? And that might be a leaf blower, like you see here. And again, you'll see all my products are steel, strictly because that's the closest, not necessarily saying that they're the best. I do like them. All of mine have been really reliable, but I think a lot of the big manufacturers nowadays are gonna have that reliability. Now, if you're looking at something that's not necessarily reliable, that kind of gets into the time cost a little bit, because if it's unreliable and you're constantly having to work on it, it costs you more time. So when we're thinking about fire breaks, you can either use a leaf blower or rake. They both get stuff done. The leaf blower is quicker though, depending on what area you're in. So if you're in an area that a leaf blower won't work, don't get it. But if you can use the leaf blower, they work a lot faster. So again, it's all just what you want to spend, cost, versus time-wise. Now, let's also think about how we can use a tool for a multi-purpose setting, and we're talking about fire here. So maybe we want to use, now this, not a great example of multi-purpose, but this is a water backpack sprayer, and this one specifically is made for fire. I got this from forestry suppliers. It is an Indian pump sprayer. Now I've taken the Indian pump off. I'm trying a few different prototypes that I hope to get to show y'all in the future. So what else could you use that would be multi-purpose instead of this? And that would be a herbicide sprayer. So if you got a backpack herbicide sprayer, you can pick them up anywhere. I think even Walmart has them, but they can be beneficial from, you can use it for herbicide. You can also use it for burning. I've used a backpack herbicide sprayer before for burning, and it works decent. Now with the multi-purpose, they may not handle everything as good as something specially designed for it. So I do like the Indian pump sprayer versus the chemical sprayer as far as a targeted spray that's not just a mist, kind of. It works better for fighting taller flames, but you can do it with a chemical sprayer. So think about what you can get now that does the most things that you need done, and that way the upfront cost may be a little bit less, and then you can think about going and getting those specialty tools later on once you've gotten the basics. Now, talking about specialty tools and talking about fire, one specialty tool that you will need for fire, here it is. How do you lose something that's red? But anyways, a drip torch is something that you will need for prescribed burning. Now, there's a few different models of drip torches. I got one. This is just the forestry suppliers drip torch here. This one's okay. Now, some of them I've had, say like this one, it likes to leak a little bit from the top, so I've got to get that fixed. There's other brands out there that I'm going to try and see which I like best, but this is one of the cheaper ones, so it's good to get started in when you need a specialty tool that's strictly for this activity. Now, I can't use a drip torch for much other than prescribed burning, but it's so useful in prescribed burning that it was worth it to get just this, even though I can only use it for limited tasks. Now, another limited task that you may have is tree planting. Now, if you're going to plant trees, I recommend getting a tree dibble. This is made planting a lot easier. I will link a video that shows how to use the tree dibble that'll be coming out next week. But essentially, you stick it in the ground, open up a hole, stick your seedling down in there, press it back in, and that way you're not having to dig and tear up the soil, and it's a lot faster than using a shovel. So again, sometimes the specialty tools, although you can't use them for much, they pay off time-wise. But let's say you're just getting into land management and you want something that is cheap. Maybe you already have it lying around your house, and I want you to think outside the box when you're thinking about these tools. So sometimes you can have stuff laying just you already own that you can use for land management. Now let's think about some of those from maybe a tree cutting aspect. Now, I can use the axe and I can cut a tree with this, but it is the cheapest cost-wise, most expensive time-wise, and I can use a chainsaw to cut a tree, but it is the most expensive cost-wise or money-wise and the cheapest time-wise. But what if there was something in between there that we might already own? And I've been playing around with this. It's just a little saber saw, reciprocating saw, whatever you want to call it. I went with Ryobi. Again, not saying they're the best, just Home Depot is the closest big box retailer. They carry Ryobi, so all my tools have been Ryobi. All my batteries are Ryobi. So this was just kind of what I already had. And I think I got this in a toolkit years ago. But I've really enjoyed this for cutting down trees. Now, you can't cut down a tree as big as this, but for a lot of your smaller stuff, you can cut it down faster with this than with your axe. And you may already have a saw laying around. Now, if not, you might not want to just go out and get it, but sometimes what you have lying around can be beneficial. Take a lawnmower, for instance. So when I first started making green fields, the first several I would make would be any of the stuff I would clear, where most people would just go in and bush hog it or something. I would use the push mower and get it done. Now, it was very time consuming, but it was something that I already had access to. I didn't have to go out and buy anything additional. So look at what you already have and see what you can make work for land management. Now, kind of wrapping up the video, thinking about what I wear. Typically, when I'm going out in the land, I wear a thicker shirt. You see me in these quite a bit. And I like the long sleeves. I learned in motorcycle riding that just because you wear long sleeves doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be hotter. It keeps the sun off of you, so I don't have to worry about getting sunburn. It keeps me it prevents the sun from heating you quite as much, I've found with this. Now, you do get a little bit hotter than if you were going to be wearing, like a tech pullover kind of thing. However, when you're going around in the woods, especially in briars, having something thicker is beneficial from not getting cut up. Same with your pants. Wear thicker pants, wear boots. Always wear boots when you're in the woods, or snake chaps, one of the two. Snake bites are no joke, and depending on where you are, that can pose some issues. Now, what else do I typically wear? Now, if I'm using a chainsaw or something, I will wear whatever that is, specific PPE. So for the chainsaw, I don't have my chaps with me, but I will have a hard hat. Again, steel, got this from Ace. I like one that has a face shield on the front to protect my face and an ear muff. So I want to hear when I get older. So ear protection, it's not unmanly or anything to wear ear protection, eye protection. Caring for your body is something very beneficial. And that's one thing about being in the woods. It's very therapeutic. It's very good for your body. But if you start running the chainsaw without ear protection, it doesn't take long to start damaging your hearing long term. So always wear PPE when you are using this type of equipment, just from a safety and a long-term life enjoyability. Now, when you're working, you'll want gloves. I enjoy gloves, and I typically keep a few spare pairs of these in the truck just in case anyone else comes out that doesn't have them. Gloves are relatively inexpensive, but they're very beneficial, so always keep gloves on hand. And then I like to wear orange. So you'll see in a lot of my videos, I wear an orange hat. I got this hat from Eagles and Angels. It is a store. He makes hats. It's got the leather patch here. Now, some of them, like this one I'm wearing, has a camo backing. He makes them using soldiers' uniforms, military members' uniforms, and a portion of the proceeds that he makes from the hats, he made some wallets, some notebook covers, and a portion of those proceeds go to benefit whatever military member's charity of choice. So I really enjoy supporting companies that give back to the community. So I'll wear this hat when I'm in the woods, and then I typically have my forester's vest. And I like the forester's vest for a few different reasons. One, it's orange, so you can see it, you can see me, especially when you're working with other people. It's good to keep track of them. And then it has a lot of pockets, so I carry a lot of stuff with me when I'm in the woods. And carrying this, I have a zipper in the back. I can keep a couple of Nalgene bottles to stay hydrated. So having orange and being able to carry stuff, both beneficial. Now, the last tools that I want to talk about is a cell phone. Now, a cell phone, if you watched our Management Monday video on it, they can do a lot of really useful stuff as far as mapping. You can go back and see my videos on that. They're good for using the Silvix manual, which I covered, but always have a phone with you. It's also just a backup safety measure. Now, sometimes you may not have cell phone service and something, you don't have to carry it, but I do, is a Garmin InReach. This is the Mini 2. Now it is a separate service, but it uses satellites, and I can text from either this or my phone when I don't have cell phone service. Now, I've tried this in the woods and it's worked out fairly well, sending text messages, and it also has a SOS button. So if I open this, you can see a little button inside of there. If I press that, it would alert first responders of my location, something's happened, and if I'm able, I could message in there and have communication back and forth to let them know what happened. Now, this may be a little bit overkill, a lot may think, but there's been times where people would get lost or even just, get too hot and something happened and they couldn't get back to their truck. There was a story about that fairly recently, this past year, in Alabama, where a guy was out on his hunting club. I think he got a little bit too hot, couldn't make it back to his truck, and they had to end up doing a search and rescue to find him. Now, he ended up okay, but I always try to keep a way to communicate with it. So with that, guys, this is not all of the tools I have, but this is a good start, and I hope you got a few ideas as far as thinking about the cost, time versus money, thinking about, multi-purpose versus specialty tools, looking around and seeing what you may already have that you can use for land management, and then gearing up right to go in the woods and be as effective as possible when you're starting your management journey. So with that, guys, thank you for watching. I hope you've gotten something out of this video. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe to our channel, like and comment on this video. Comment down below what tools you use. I'm constantly looking at what new tools I might want to get, and I'm interested to see what y'all use. With that, guys, thanks for watching. Happy management and God bless.